Good morning, everyone. I am your teacher, Christine, and today we'll be discussing one of the philosophies in education, which is the linguistic philosophy. So, actually, there are many philosophies in education, but today we'll be discussing only linguistic philosophy. So, let's start. Okay, so the word linguistic comes from the Latin word lingua, which means tongue or language. Well, istic, it means knowledge or science. So, etymologically, linguistic is the scientific study of language. And when we say it is the scientific study of language, it means that linguistic is a field of study that uses scientific methods to explore and understand how language works. Now, do you know the term that is used to call a person or the people who studies language? Right, so they were called linguists. So linguists are the people who studies language. So they are very curious people who study language and learn how it works, how we use it to communicate, and how it influences our thoughts and interactions. One of the most famous linguists of the 20th century is Noam Chomsky. So I know you all know him. He's very familiar, right? So Noam Chomsky based his linguistic works on a certain philosophical doctrines. He is a very influential linguist who is well known for his work in the field of language study. Before I move forward, I will give you first an overview on what we will be discussing for today. So, first, we will be discussing the definition of linguistic philosophy. Second, its goal of education. Third is the role of teachers. Next is the teaching methods. And lastly, the subjects that are covered in this philosophy. So now let's start with the definition of linguistic philosophy. Okay, now let's start with the definition of linguistic philosophy. Okay, so linguistic philosophy, it is a view which suggests that by giving more attention to language, we can find solutions or dissolve many philosophical problems. This can be achieved through language reform or by gaining a better understanding of the language we use in everyday life. So in simple terms, a linguistic philosophy is a perspective that suggests that a lot of philosophical problems can be resolved or understood better by focusing on language. So for example, let's consider the classic philosophical question of what is the nature of reality. So of course, a linguistic philosopher would argue that the way we talk about reality and the concept that we use to describe it will greatly influence our understanding of reality. So, by analyzing the language we use to talk about reality, we can gain a deeper insight into the nature of reality itself. In addition, linguistic philosophy also suggests that some philosophical problems can be dissolved rather than resolved. So, how do you do that? Okay, so they believe that if we carefully examine the language that is used to frame a problem, we might come to realize that it is really not a problem. It is just a cause of misunderstanding or linguistic confusion. So if we clarify that language that we use, we can dissolve the problem and move towards an accurate understanding. Okay, now let's proceed with the goals of education. So the first goal of education of linguistic philosophy is to teach learners to use language that is correct, precise, grammatical, coherent, and accurate. So linguistic philosophy aims to help students understand and use the language that is accurate and follows the rules of grammar. So it's about teaching them to communicate effectively and clearly using the right words and sentence structure. So for example, in an English class, the teacher helps the student understand the proper use of grammar rules, such as subject-verb agreement and correct sentence structure. Second is to help students to expand their vocabularies. So, linguistic philosophy aims to assist students in learning new words and increasing their knowledge of different words and their meanings. So, by expanding their vocabulary, students will be able to express themselves effectively and will be able to understand others better. So, for example, every week a teacher gives new words to his or her students. and he or she will encourage the students to use the word in their communication or their writing. So in that way, the students would be able to gain vocabulary every week. They will be able to gain new words every week. Okay, so in linguistic philosophy, they might provide word lists, play vocabulary games, or assign reading materials that expose students to a wide range of vocabulary because they aim to expand the vocabularies of students. Third, they teach the learners how to communicate clearly. So in linguistic philosophy, they involves assisting students on how to express their thoughts and ideas in a way that is easy for others to understand. It includes like the things like using of proper pronunciation. So they do not encourage over pronunciation of words, and they teach students on how to pronounce the words correctly, and also organizing their thoughts logically. So they encourage students to think first before they talk. And lastly, the using of appropriate body language and gestures. So they teach students on how to talk with gestures or body language, because some of the body language or gestures can cause misunderstanding, so they do not encourage using body language and gestures. Fourth is caution the learner of the verbal and nonverbal barriers of communication. This means making students aware of the potential obstacles that can hinder effective communication. Verbal barriers can include things like using unclear language and speaking too fast. And nonverbal barriers can include body, language, or cultural differences. By being aware of these barriers, students can work to overcome and improve their communication skills. Lastly, they teach the learners to speak as many languages as they can. So this means that they encourage students to learn and speak multiple languages. By learning different languages, students can expand their cultural understanding, communicate with a wider range of people, and enhance their overall linguistic abilities. Okay, next is the role of teacher in linguistic philosophy. So in linguistic philosophy, the teacher provides experiential learning to learn language. So from the word experiential, it comes from the word experience. So the teacher provides experience to the students while they are learning a language. So the teacher provides real life experiences, not just giving them lectures or textbooks. So they create opportunities for students to learn and practice language skills through real life experiences and activities. As I said earlier, instead of just allowing the students to learn from textbooks or lectures, the teacher designs activities that allow students to use the language in practical and meaningful ways. So I'll give you an example. Let's just say that the students are learning French and the topic is about going to a market. Instead of just teaching vocabulary and grammar rules from textbook, the teacher decides to create an experiential learning activity. And what experiential learning activity that would connect learning French and going to a market? Okay, so the teacher organizes a field trip to a local farmer's market. And then the students are given a task to navigate the market and interact with the vendors using the French language. So they are still learning the language while they are experiencing the real life scenario. They have to ask questions about the products, negotiate prices, and make purchases using the language that they have learned. And during the field trip, the teacher will act as a guide, providing support and guidance when needed. They encourage the students to actively use the language, helping them with pronunciation, vocabulary, and grammar as they engage in real life conversations. So that is the role of teacher in linguistic philosophy. They let the students experience while they are learning. Okay, now let's proceed to the teaching methods of linguistic philosophy. So first is teach language and communication through experiential way. And as I said earlier, experiential way comes from the word experience. So they let the students experience hands-on activities or real-life experiences that they would be able to use the language or that they would be able to apply the language instead of just memorizing vocabulary and or just reading from textbooks, so they were be able to experience while learning. Second, make the classroom a place for the interplay of minds and heart. So making the classroom a place for the interplay of minds and hearts means creating an environment where students can not only learn academically, but they will also be able to connect emotionally and share their thoughts and ideas freely. It's about fostering a sense of community and respect among students, where they feel comfortable expressing their opinions and engaging in discussions. So they will be able to share their thoughts and ideas freely without being judged. And I'll give you an example. So, for example, a teacher encouraged students to share their personal stories or reflections related to a topic being discussed. So it will allow the teacher for a deeper understanding of his or her learners, and it would give them connection among the learners. So with that story, the student will be able to share their thoughts or their personal stories freely without thinking of being judged. Lastly, facilitate dialogue among learners because in the exchange of words, there is also an exchange of ideas. So, facilitating dialogue among learners emphasizes the importance of communication and exchange of ideas among students. It involves creating opportunities for students to engage in conversations, debates, and discussions with their peers. This helps them develop critical thinking skills, gain different perspectives, and learn from one another. So now let's move to the last part of our discussion, which is the subjects covered in linguistic philosophy. So we have here semantics, phonology, pragmatics, psycholinguistics, social linguistics, syntax, anthropological linguistics, language contact, morphology, computational linguistics, ethics, historical linguistics, logic, philosophy of language, semiotics, and world philosophy. So these are the subjects that covered in linguistic philosophy, and I know some of the subjects here are familiar, right? Okay, so before I end my discussion, I will leave you with this quote from John Powell. Listening in dialogue is listening more to meaning than to words. In true listening, we reach behind the words, see through them, to find the person who is being revealed. Listening is a search to find the treasure of a true person, as revealed verbally and non-verbally. So that's it for my discussion of linguistic philosophy. Once again, I am Christine Manimtim, and thank you for listening.